This is apropos. Well, since the US Vice President described the slain conservative influencer as a martyr for Christianity, admirers of Charlie Kirk have been suggesting that his assassination will galvanise throngs of people to become more engaged in evangelical and Catholic churches. Evocations of Kirk-inspired religious fervour surfaced almost immediately after his death, as Siobhan Silk reports.
Thank you for protecting him.
Evangelical Christian leaders pray for then presidential candidate Donald Trump, a man they see as a saviour.
We believe you're a vessel.
Amen.
You're a chosen vessel.
It's a symbiotic relationship.
Christians, get out and vote just this time. It'll be fixed. It'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians.
The Christian vote was essential in getting him back into the White House, and he's rewarded them with victories like the overturning of abortion rights. Now contraception, same-sex marriage and no-fault divorce are in their sights, as is shifting funding from public schools to Christian schools, part of a mission to end one of the fundamental principles of the United States, the separation of church and state. Evangelical Christians are deeply embedded in the second Trump administration, including his cabinet. This is a culmination of a decades-long strategy that dates back to the 1980s, when the original megachurch pastor Jerry Falwell founded the Moral Majority, a now defunct conservative movement that for the first time put social and moral issues at the heart of US politics and helped put true believers at the heart of US power. The evangelical Christian lobby has also been winning the hearts and minds of ordinary people, with notable success in one particular demographic, disaffected young white men. They've been recruited en masse by a new breed of influencers and podcasters like the late Charlie Kirk, credited with turning a new generation towards Christian nationalism, a way of ensuring its continued survival. These methods have been making inroads in other countries like Brazil, where far-right former President Jair Bolsonaro, now convicted of attempting a coup, sought and won the support of a rapidly growing evangelical base predicted to soon outnumber Catholics. But though Bolsonaro is gone for now, evangelical Christians continue to have an outsized influence on politics. 40% of members of Congress are part of the Evangelical Parliamentary Front, the so-called Bible bloc. Even in France, where traditionally only a fraction of the population practices a religion, evangelical churches are growing. And in a country that prides itself on its secularism, conservative Christians are now trying to influence politics, with the National Council of French Evangelicals sending lobbyists into the halls of power. That's mirrored in the EU. Groups like the Alliance Defending Freedom are active in Brussels. It's an American Christian advocacy group that was instrumental in using US courts to overturn abortion rights. And now, well-funded and determined, it's attempting the same tactics in Europe.
At the European Court of Human Rights.
To discuss, we are joined now by Gagné André, Professor and Chair of the Department of Theological Studies at Concordia University. Thanks so much for being with us on the programme. Firstly, let's start with the basics. Evangelicism, what exactly is it? It's a very large umbrella term, isn't it, Gagné?
Yes, it is a very, very large term that engulfs a lot of different various types of religious expressions, especially expressions like Baptists or Pentecostals and so on. And when we think about evangelicals, essentially we can reduce it to about four things. Right? The emphasis on the Bible. The Bible is the Word of God. The emphasis on the necessity of conversion, experiencing new birth. The idea of the message of Jesus's death on the cross. And of course, the idea of activism, meaning sharing one's faith and participating in promoting the Christian message. So essentially that is what constitutes evangelicalism, but it's a very, very large umbrella term that regroups various types of religious denominations and congregations.
And we largely associate it, of course, with the US, but how big is the movement here in Europe, do you know?
Yes, you're right. The reflex is to associate it with the US. There's 23% of the people in the US, about 80 million people out of a population close to 350 million in the US that belong or have a claim to be evangelical. In Europe, however, the numbers are quite less. In fact, evangelicals only represent about 2.5% of the population. That's about 22 to 23 million evangelicals. And you have evangelicals, of course, in various countries, like in France, there's about 1 million, in the UK, around maybe 5 million, in Germany, about 2 million, and in other countries even less. So the proportions are not comparable to what we see, for example, in the US and in Brazil.
And is it having an increasing role in politics, though, here in Europe? And if so, why?
It has, up to a certain extent. Of course, when you talk about evangelicals, they do have certain concerns. And some of those concerns often are reflected in ideas that parallel a bit what we see in the US. What stems a lot in the US is this idea, for example, of religious freedom. Sometimes evangelicals feel that their religious freedom, even in the context of Europe, they have less religious freedom. Some of them, at least that's what they encounter. So it's normal for them to want to have sometimes a voice. And they do. We can't neglect the fact that evangelicals remain, for most of them, people that have conservative values in relation, or at least in that really differ from what we see in a secular society. Of course, they value traditional family, issues around abortion. They're against abortion. They're all pro-life, issues around gender roles, and so on. So when they do have opportunities to speak out their mind, they will take those opportunities because for them, they are people that get involved in elections, and they feel that they should have a voice. At the same time, due to the small proportion of evangelicals in Europe, the impact is not really significant due to the fact that, of course, a lot of European countries are quite secular. At the same time, you'll have other countries in Eastern Europe, for example, that are more traditionalist Catholics, that some of those values sometimes align with those of evangelicals. And sometimes what they will do is they will get together, cooperate on certain issues so that they can have one voice and share the things that are important to them. And even if these things, they can bring them into the public and political arena, if they have the opportunity to do so, they will do so. At the same time, what's very important, and this is important to stress, a lot of evangelicals, and most of them, I would say, in Europe, do not want to associate or be associated with what the brand of evangelicalism that we see in the US, the type of Christian nationalist agenda that is pushed. Many of them actually want to distance themselves and don't want to be identified as evangelicals that share a similar agenda as that of the US. But of course, again, some of their values, up to a certain extent, are social conservative.
Yeah, does it play out more subtly then, perhaps, here in Europe? Because we saw during the referendum campaigns in Ireland, when it came to same-sex marriage and abortion, that influence was creeping into some of the debate that we were seeing around those issues.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, it's more subtle. And they will play on some of these issues. But again, to have a direct impact on policies, it would be much more difficult for them. At the same time, it's very interesting. When you look at the situation of the European Union, you have a party that is called the European Conservatives and Reformists that is currently the fourth largest group in the European Parliament. And they constitute a group of individuals that do value traditional types of social conservative values that are very, very close to the values of people that we would label as being the Christian right in the US. They value the churches as being important institutions in Europe, and that should remain. And they very much push the idea that there needs to be religious freedom in Europe. That means that people are allowed to express their ideas. They are allowed to have views that are not necessarily aligning themselves with the views of, a secularist Europe. So again, you will see this played out, but in more subtle ways, because they don't have the demographics that are present, of course, in the US.
And would you agree, in the US particularly, that this is kind of winning over a lot of those young, white, male, disaffected young people, men particularly?
Absolutely, eh? You're absolutely right, and we've seen it with the phenomenon, Charlie Kirk, the impact that his death has had on a lot of young people. He was, of course, very influential on college campuses in over 3,000 campuses across the nation, and really engaging in this idea of debate and open discussion. That's what at least he tried to say, or the way he promoted his events as being open debate. But that we can maybe question that up to a certain extent. But yes, there's a generation of young people sometimes that feel they have lost their way somehow, and it gives them a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging. You see, when we talk about evangelicalism, and maybe it's important to say this, at the moment, the growth of evangelicalism globally is more in the global South countries. The exception is really in global North countries is really the US. In Europe, the growth is not as phenomenal. So it's global South countries. And at the same time, the types of evangelical churches that grow more significantly are those that I call Pentecostal, neo-charismatic types of evangelical groups, where it's all about experiencing the divine. It's experiential Christianity. It's being part of something. It's having God transform our lives. It's this idea of a religion of the heart versus a dogmatic religion that has no life. So that's very attractive for a lot of people that are looking for meaning and looking for a way to actually make a difference in the world. And that's why it attracts a lot of young people.
Gagné, André, we'll have to leave it there for now. Thank you so much, though, for being with us on the programme this evening. Well, that's it from us for now. Stay with us, though, for more world news here on France 24.